The evening Lagos wore its usual impatient face, horns arguing with one another, streetlights blinking like tired eyes, and heat still clinging to walls as if it paid rent. Kelechi sat behind the wheel with the kind of confidence that always showed up 5 minutes before trouble. His shirt was crisp, his wristwatch was loud, and his smile had that careless shine men borrow when they think consequence is for other people. Beside him, Nena kept her handbag on her lap like a sensible guard dog. She wasn't dressed for scandal. She was dressed for dignity, simple, neat, and expensive in a way that didn't scream. When Kelechi suggested they just pass his place for a while, he said it as if he was inviting her to taste pepper soup, not to step into the mouth of a lion. Nena turned slowly, stared at him the way Nigerian women stare when they've heard foolishness before, and sighed. "Kelechi," she said, voice flat, "I can't go to a married man's house." She didn't whisper it like a secret. She stated it like a boundary line drawn with chalk on a clean floor. "Don't put me inside what will stain my name," she added, because in Lagos, rumors travel faster than dispatch riders, and shame is the only thing people deliver for free. Kelechi chuckled, the kind of laugh men use when they want to shrink a woman's wisdom into an overreaction. "Ah, you and your strong principles," he teased, tapping the steering wheel as if it agreed with him. "You think I'm a child? You think I want to disgrace you." He said disgrace like it was a foreign word with no visa to enter his life. But Nena didn't laugh back. She shifted away slightly, eyes on the road ahead, watching the headlights carve through the night as if they were cutting paths through doubt. "I don't do that thing," she repeated, firmer now. "I'm not stepping into a married woman's space. Not even to just sit. Today it's sitting. Tomorrow it's story. Next tomorrow it's she has been coming since last year." She gave him a small, humorless smile that held centuries of female caution. "My brother, I like my peace the way I like my soup, hot and clean. Not served with somebody else's spoon." Kelechi's grin twitched. The truth was, he hadn't expected resistance. His plan was simple in his head, like most bad plans are: get her inside, be bold, enjoy the thrill of doing what shouldn't be done, then return to normal life like nothing happened. Because that's how arrogant men treat betrayal, like it's a short errand. He tried again, softer now, voice becoming that sweet Lagos persuasion that can sell you suya you didn't want. "Listen," he said, leaning closer, lowering his tone as if the night itself might report him. "Tina is not around. She traveled for her family's annual meeting. 2 days. She won't even come back tomorrow." He said it with the calm of someone reading weather forecast. "Guaranteed. Nena, you're overthinking. Nobody will see you. I'll drive in and drive out. Quick." Nena's brows lifted. "So you want me to hide like rat?" she asked, and there it was, humor with teeth. "If your wife is not around, why are you not taking me to a normal place like other people? Why must it be your house? Is it because you want to feel like king?" Kelechi waved his hand. "Normal place," he echoed, as if the word offended him. "This Lagos is not normal. People are watching everywhere. At least my house is private." Nena's mouth tightened at the word private, because private is where secrets grow muscles. She looked at him again, searching for honesty the way you search for a missing earring, with hope, but prepared to find nothing. "Kelechi," she warned, "I'm not entering trouble. Don't drag me inside your own problem and call it romance." And for a brief moment, even Kelechi felt the weight of her words. Then he shrugged it off like dust, because pride has a way of making warnings sound like background noise. Kelechi drove like a man escaping boredom, not like a man carrying fire in his car. The city flowed past them, night markets still awake, hawkers weaving between vehicles, and the smell of roasted corn sneaking into the car whenever they slowed. Nena remained quiet for a while, not because she had agreed, but because she was thinking. Her silence wasn't soft. It was the kind that folds its arms and waits for the truth to confess by itself. Kelechi, sensing her hesitation, began to talk more, too much. In fact, the way guilty people talk, as if words can build a fence around wrongdoing. "I'm telling you," he insisted, flicking on the indicator like he was signaling responsibility. "Tina is gone. She left earlier. She'll be at the family meeting. 2 days. You're safe." He kept repeating safe as if it was a prayer. Nena stared at the dashboard, then at him. So, she said slowly, your wife traveled and you chose tonight, this very night, to start behaving like your house is a hotel room? Kelechi's jaw tightened, and he forced a laugh. Nena, don't start that sermon, he said. Life is hard. Man needs small enjoyment. He said it casually, like enjoyment was a medical prescription. Nena turned fully now. Small enjoyment that can destroy somebody's home, she replied. And don't say life is hard, like Tina didn't also wake up and face the same Legos traffic. Her voice stayed controlled, but the words landed heavy, the way truth lands when it's not begging for attention. Kelechi tried a different tactic, gentler, almost romantic. You know I respect you, he said, putting a hand briefly on her knee, then withdrawing quickly like he remembered she wasn't a fool. That's why I'm telling you the truth. If I wanted to trap you, I wouldn't even explain. Tina is not around. The house is empty. I just want peace for one night. Nena's eyes narrowed. Peace, she repeated, and a small laugh escaped her, short and sharp. Is that what you call it now? So when your wife is around, it's war. Kelechi frowned. You know what I mean. She nodded slowly. Yes. I know what you mean, she said, voice dipping into irony. You mean you want to eat your cake and still use the same mouth to ask for dessert? Kelechi sighed dramatically, like he was the victim. You're making it sound worse than it is, he complained. Nena shook her head. No, you're the one making it sound like it's nothing, she corrected. That's the problem. You talk about betrayal like it's small change. Like it's 5 naira you can drop and step on. Still, the lie sounded polished. It sounded practiced. And polished lies are dangerous because they shine enough to distract even careful people. Kelechi kept layering it. The annual family meeting. How Tina never misses it. How she'd stay 2 nights. How he'd even spoken to her earlier. He described it with so much detail that it began to feel real, the way a storyteller can make you believe in a village you've never visited. Nena's resistance weakened, not because she suddenly approved, but because doubt is a slow thief. She began to ask questions that showed she was slipping. Are you sure she left today? Are you sure she won't return tonight? What if she forgot something? Kelechi jumped at each question like a man eager to pass an exam he wrote for himself. She won't return, he said quickly. She already traveled. Then softer, as if offering comfort. And even if she did, she would call. She wouldn't just appear. He didn't know those words would later choke him. Nena looked out the window again, watching the city lights blur. She felt that tug in her chest, the one that warns you when your values are about to be tested. And even as she sat there, listening to Kelechi paint safety with his tongue, she whispered to herself what she didn't say aloud. If I enter that house, I may leave with a story I can't wash off. By the time they neared the estate, the road grew quieter, the kind of quiet that feels like a stage waiting for actors. The streetlights were fewer, the houses bigger, and the air carried the faint smell of generator fumes and cut grass. Nena's fingers tightened around her bag strap. Kelechi, she said again, softer now but serious. Let's just go somewhere else. Even if it's your friend's place, even if it's a lounge, even if it's inside the car, anything but your house. The fact that she offered alternatives showed she was trying to save both of them. Save herself from shame. Save him from the kind of trouble that doesn't end with apologies. Kelechi shook his head immediately. No, he said. Too risky. Someone will see us. He glanced at her, then added, Don't worry. You're with me. And there it was, the most common lie men tell when they're about to lead someone into a pit. You're with me. As if being with a foolish person is safety. Nena let out a small, reluctant laugh. Because sometimes humor is the only way to stop yourself from crying ahead of time. So because I'm with you, the world will close its eyes, she asked. Even God. Kelechi smirked. God understands, he said carelessly, and Nena's head snapped toward him. Ha, ha, she warned. Don't bring God inside this nonsense. Let him rest. Kelechi slowed, signaling a turn toward the estate. Nena leaned forward slightly, peering through the windshield, as if seeing the gate might strengthen her courage to say no. I'm serious, she insisted. I don't want to enter and later hear that I ruined home. I don't want Tina's name to become my curse. Kelechi inhaled sharply, annoyed now. Nena, must you always be dramatic? He asked, the irritation in his voice rising like fuel. You think I'm forcing you? If you want to go down, say so. I'll take you. For a moment, the offer hung in the air like a test. Nena's heart beat harder. She could have said yes. She could have ended it there, returned to her own bed and her own clean conscience. But the night had already wrapped itself around them, and Kelechi's confidence began to feel like a hand pushing gently but firmly. He softened again, switching from annoyance to charm in one breath. Look, he said, I know you're a good woman. That's why I like you. But sometimes you have to stop thinking like the whole world is a court sitting to judge you. Nena's lips parted in disbelief. But the world is a court, she replied. Even if there are no judges, there are tongues. She paused, then added with bitter humor, and tongues don't need evidence. They just need appetite. The gate appeared ahead, tall and proud, and something inside Nena tightened. An instinct, a warning bell. She spoke again, voice lower, almost pleading. Kelechi, last chance. Don't do this. Kelechi's hand stayed steady on the wheel, but his eyes flashed with that stubbornness that turns grown men into toddlers holding sharp objects. You're safe, he repeated, slower now, as if speaking to a child. Tina is away. Annual family meeting. 2 days. Then he added the final persuasion, the one meant to seal her decision. If you don't trust me, then what are we doing? Nena swallowed. Trust. That word can be a rope or a trap, depending on who holds the other end. She stared at him for a long second, then looked away, as if turning her face could turn away the consequences too. I trust you, she said finally, but her voice sounded like someone handing over her last coin. Kelechi smiled, satisfied, like a man who had won an argument he shouldn't have started. The car rolled closer to the gate, and the estate lights greeted them with cold brightness, bright enough to show everything, but never bright enough to stop it. And as the SUV slowed, Nena whispered to herself, almost like prayer, almost like regret, please let this not be the night my name changes. The estate gate stood like an old man who had seen too much and learned to speak with silence. It wasn't just iron and paint, it was memory, routine, and the unspoken law of the street. What enters here must be accounted for. As Kelechi's SUV rolled closer, the headlights washed over the guard post, and Musa straightened up with the alertness of a man who understood that some nights don't come with second chances. The second guard, Chima, leaned out slightly, trying to catch the driver's face before the car fully stopped. At first it was business as usual, salute, respectful nod, the practiced good evening, sir. But then Musa's eyes shifted past Kelechi's shoulder and caught the woman in the passenger seat. A small pause entered his body, tiny, but loud. The kind of pause that says, this one is not madam. And just like that, the air changed. Even the security light above them seemed to brighten, as if it wanted to witness well. Musa stepped forward, polite, careful. The way you handle a hot plate when your fingers are already sore. Good evening, Oga, he said again, but his voice carried a caution that wasn't there before. His eyes flicked toward the driveway, inside the compound and back. Sir, Madam's car is inside. Those words landed like a pin on a balloon. Nena's spine stiffened immediately, as if her body had been waiting for a reason to run. Her hand gripped her bag tighter, and her eyes shot to Kelechi's face, searching it for any crack of truth. Kelechi, however, wore irritation like perfume. So, he snapped, as if a wife's car was just a decoration. Musa didn't move away. He cleared his throat gently, choosing his words the way one chooses a path around broken bottles. Oga, we saw Madam earlier, he added, quieter now. She came in not long ago. Chima shifted his weight, uneasy. Because even as a guard, you don't want to be the one opening the door to calamity. Nena's lips parted, and the question almost escaped. You said she traveled. But she swallowed it, because shame has a way of tightening the throat. Kelechi leaned closer to the window, lowering it further like a man about to correct a child. Are you telling me what you saw, he demanded, or what you think? Musa held his ground, respectful but firm. Sir, I'm just informing you, he said. So that, Kelechi cut him off sharply. So that what? You'll start policing my movement in my own house? Open the gate." The word open came out like an order, not a request. Musa hesitated. The kind of hesitation that isn't stubbornness, it's survival. He looked at Kelechi, then at Nena, then back at Kelechi, as though he could rearrange reality by staring at it hard enough. Behind them, the road was quiet, but quiet doesn't mean safe. It just means the witnesses are sleeping. Nena shifted in her seat, swallowing the panic that rose like hot Gary. Her mind raced with all the things she had tried to avoid: Tina's face, Tina's home, Tina's dignity, now waiting somewhere inside that compound like a storm sitting calmly on a chair. She turned slightly toward Kelechi, her voice small but sharp. "Kelechi," she began, and the way she said his name carried both warning and regret. He didn't even look at her. "Relax," he muttered, as if trouble could be calmed with a lazy command. Then he faced the guards again, chin lifted high. "I said open the gate. Tina traveled. Her car might be here. Maybe she left it. Is that your business?" Musa's eyes narrowed briefly, not in disrespect, but in disbelief, because in Lagos, lies have a smell, and this one was beginning to stink. Still, a guard is a guard, and a man with a title can turn a small job into a big problem. Musa stepped back reluctantly and gestured to the control. The gate began to move, groaning open slowly, as though it was complaining. And in that slow groan, Nena heard something that sounded like the house itself, saying, "You were warned." As the SUV crept into the compound, the atmosphere felt wrong, too still, too prepared, like the night was holding its breath for a reveal. The tires rolled over the paved driveway, and the security light followed them, casting long shadows that stretched like accusing fingers. Kelechi drove straight ahead with stiff confidence, but Nena could feel the tension in his hands. Tiny tremors he tried to hide by tightening his grip. She stared at the parked car near the entrance and felt her stomach drop. It wasn't just any car. It was a woman's car that belonged. It sat there with the arrogance of ownership, as if it was saying, "She is inside." Nena's mind flashed back to everything she had said, everything she had feared, and the fact that the gate had confirmed it all. She turned to Kelechi again, this time not as a lover or companion, but as a woman trying to save herself from the consequences of a man's foolishness. "Kelechi," she whispered, "let's leave. Let's just go. This is not normal." But Kelechi's pride, once awakened, behaved like a stubborn goat. It refused to turn back even when the road was clearly burning. He gave a short laugh, forced and ugly. "You want to run because you saw a car?" he asked, turning it into a joke the way men turn serious matters into comedy when they are scared. Maybe she left it. Maybe her driver parked it. Maybe she traveled and came back to pick it up. He was throwing guesses like stones into water, hoping one would float. Nena stared at him in disbelief. "So you're now doing maybe?" she asked, sarcasm creeping in to cover her fear. "When we were coming, it was 2 days and don't worry. Now it's maybe." Kelechi's face tightened. "Stop," he hissed. "You want the guards to hear you?" Nena's eyes widened. "So now you're afraid of guards hearing," she whispered back, humor sharp as pepper. "But you weren't afraid of guards seeing." He shot her a look full of warning, the kind men give when they want to silence a woman, because silence is easier than accountability. "You are overreacting," he said again, but the words sounded thinner inside the compound, like they'd lost power at the gate. Behind them, Musa and Chima watched with the tight-faced patience of men who knew they had already done their duty by warning. Musa's fingers hovered near his phone not for gossip, but for caution, because when the rich man brings trouble home, it is the poor people at the gate that get dragged into it. He didn't want any story of "why did you allow him" to enter his own life. Chima leaned close and murmured, "Oga no gree hear word." Musa sighed quietly. "Word no day enter proud ear," he replied. Their voices were low, but the truth behind them was loud. Pride makes people deaf until consequences become a megaphone. As Kelechi parked, he stepped out of the car with a swagger that looked rehearsed, like he was acting brave for an audience that wasn't clapping. He moved around to Nena's side quickly, opening her door with exaggerated gentleness, as if courtesy could rewrite the sin. "Come," he urged, offering his hand. Nena looked at his hand the way one looks at a handshake in a dream, uncertain, suspicious. "Kelechi," She said, "I'm not stepping down." "I'm not." He cut her off softly but firmly. "Nena," he pleaded, switching into sweet voice again. "Please. You've come this far. Don't embarrass me." She blinked at him. "So your embarrassment is your priority?" she asked. And for a second, she almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because Nigerian men can fear embarrassment more than disaster. He leaned in closer, voice dropping. "Just enter," he insisted. "If anything feels wrong, we'll leave immediately." Nena wanted to remind him that everything already feels wrong. But the compound was quiet, and quiet can make you feel exposed. The guards could see them. The neighbors' windows were dark, but not blind. The night itself felt like a witness. Against her instincts, Nena stepped out slowly, not because she believed him, but because she feared the humiliation of being left at the gate like a rejected secret. She adjusted her dress, held her bag tightly, and followed Kelechi toward the front door with the careful steps of someone walking into a room where she might become a headline. Kelechi reached the door, keys in hand, jaw clenched. He pushed the key into the lock with a stubborn confidence that was starting to crack. And even as he turned the knob, he didn't notice that the house was not asleep, not truly. Because somewhere inside, the air was already waiting. Earlier that same evening, Tina had been standing at a busy park with a small travel bag by her feet, her wrapper folded neatly inside like a promise she intended to keep. The annual family meeting was one of those gatherings you don't play with, elders seated like judges, aunties armed with questions sharper than cutlasses, cousins measuring your life progress with their eyes as if they were accountants. Tina had planned to be there for 2 days, not because she loved stress, but because family duty in Nigeria doesn't accept "I'm tired" as an excuse. Her phone buzzed with messages from relatives. "Have you left? Make sure you come early so we can start on time. Don't let them say you are doing big woman." Tina inhaled, trying to balance duty with safety. The sky was already dimming, the kind of dim that warns you about night travel. She checked the time again and again, waiting for the bus she was supposed to board, what people called the boss, big enough to swallow luggage and impatience. But time moved without mercy, and the bus didn't show. Every few minutes, a tout would shout destinations with confidence that didn't match reality. Ibadan straight. Abeokuta, now. Only 2 seats left. Tina watched them, unimpressed. She had seen enough Lagos 2 seats left to know it usually meant stand if you want. She called the number she was given for the bus and got the kind of response that always sounds like a lie. "Madam, we're coming," the voice said. "Traffic." Tina looked at the road. Traffic was Lagos's middle name, yes, but night travel was another thing entirely. Night travel was where fear grows legs. As the minutes dragged, the park grew more chaotic. Street lights flickered. The crowd thinned into smaller groups, and the ones remaining began to look less like travelers and more like people you shouldn't meet in dim light. Tina's instincts rose like a protective mother. She remembered the warnings women passed between themselves like heirlooms. Don't enter night bus alone. If you miss it, you miss it. Your life is not worth punctuality. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Kelechi's name flashed on the screen. She didn't pick. Not because she was angry, but because she didn't have the patience for his "Are you safe?" questions that usually came with a distracted tone, like he was ticking a box. She just stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then she looked at the road again and made a decision that felt small, but would later feel like fate. "I'm going home," she murmured to herself. It wasn't defeat, it was wisdom. She hailed a ride back, tightening her grip on her bag, and as she entered the car, she told the driver, "Please, take me straight. No detour." The driver nodded, eyes forward. Tina leaned back and exhaled. There was a quiet relief in choosing safety over obligation, even though she knew her aunties would later complain that she should have tried harder. In Nigeria, people can scold you for surviving. When Tina arrived home, the compound greeted her with familiar stillness. The gate opened. The guards greeted respectfully, and she walked in with the tired confidence of a woman who had fought traffic, impatience, and duty all in one evening. She dropped her bag near the entrance and loosened her shoes, rolling her shoulders like someone removing invisible burdens. "Madam, you didn't travel again?" Musa asked with surprise, stepping forward. Tina smiled faintly. "I miss the boss," she replied. "And I'm not doing night journey. Let them hold meeting without me. I'll explain tomorrow." Musa nodded, understanding. "Better so, madam," he said, "because even a guard knows that night roads can turn a simple trip into tragedy." Tina went inside, turned on a few lights, and sank into the couch with the kind of exhaustion that makes you quiet. She poured herself tea, not because she wanted it, but because it felt like normal life. For a moment, the house was just a house again, safe, private, ordinary. Tina had no idea that her choice to come back was not just about avoiding night travel. It was about walking into a moment that was already driving toward her. Headlights on, stubborn pride in the driver's seat. The house received Tina the way a familiar place does when it knows your footsteps, without ceremony, without suspicion. She moved through the living room slowly, dropping her handbag on the side table, loosening her wristwatch, exhaling the long breath of someone who had been holding herself together since afternoon. The television murmured in the background, some late news anchor discussing things that suddenly felt very far away. Tina wasn't thinking about marriage or betrayal or intuition. She was thinking about how hunger creeps in quietly and how tea always tastes better at night. She went into the kitchen, reheated leftovers, and ate standing, scrolling briefly through her phone. Missed calls from family members piled up, questions about why she hadn't arrived yet, reminders that elders don't like waiting. She typed a short message, "I missed the bus. I'll explain tomorrow." Then she muted the group chat. Some explanations are better given with a calm face, not rushed thumbs. After eating, Tina returned to the living room and sat down properly this time, sinking into the couch with a tired satisfaction. She kicked off her shoes and stretched her legs, the house quiet except for the soft hum of electricity. It was peaceful in a way that felt earned. She thought briefly of Kelechi, where he might be, what time he would return, and dismissed the thought without drama. Marriage had taught her not to borrow trouble from unanswered questions. If he came home late, he came home late. If he didn't, she would sleep anyway. Tina picked up her mug again, took a slow sip, and allowed herself to relax. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, unconcerned with lies or plans. Outside, the compound was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel insulated from the rest of the city. Tina leaned back, eyes half closed, letting the day finally leave her body. She didn't know how long she sat there before something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to disturb the calm. It wasn't sound at first, it was a feeling, the way your skin reacts before your mind catches up. Tina opened her eyes and listened. The television was still talking. The generator somewhere in the distance hummed. Everything was normal, too normal. She frowned slightly, setting the mug down. A strange awareness crept in, not fear exactly, but alertness. Tina stood up slowly and turned off the television, the sudden silence filling the room like held breath. She stood still, listening now with intention. The house didn't answer immediately. For a second, she almost laughed at herself. "You're tired," she thought. "That's all." She took a step toward the stairs, then paused again, head tilting slightly, as if she were listening to a story only she could hear. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, not warning, not panic, just attention. Tina didn't argue with it. She stayed where she was. The sound came next, low, controlled, deliberate. Not the rushed arrival of someone eager to be inside, but the careful approach of someone who didn't want to announce himself. Tina froze. She knew that engine. She had heard it enough times to recognize its rhythm, the slight hesitation before stopping. But something was wrong. The timing was wrong. Kelechi didn't usually come home this late without calling. And even when he did, the sound of the car carried a familiarity that soothed rather than startled. This one didn't. Tina's heart didn't race. Instead, it slowed, like it was bracing itself. She walked quietly toward the window, not to peep like a suspicious neighbor, but to confirm reality. The compound lights flicked on automatically, washing the driveway in white light. Tina saw the car pull in, and then she saw something else that made her step back slightly. The passenger door did not open immediately. That small delay spoke volumes. A lone man doesn't pause before exiting his own car. Tina moved back into the living room, positioning herself where she could see the entrance without being seen from outside. She didn't turn on extra lights. She didn't call out. Years of living had taught her that the first moment of truth belongs to the quiet observer. She stood there, arms relaxed at her sides, breathing steady. The front door remained closed, but she could sense movement behind it, the scrape of shoes, the murmur of voices lowered too late. Tina's lips pressed together, not in anger, but in recognition. So this was it. Not suspicion, not imagination. Something real, finally stepping out of shadow. She didn't feel the urge to shout or cry or pray. She felt clarity, sharp and clean. Her mind moved quickly now, cataloging facts instead of emotions. Someone is with him. The thought settled without drama. She straightened her shoulders, reached for the switch on the wall, and waited. Outside, keys jingled, a familiar sound that suddenly felt foreign. The door handle turned, paused, turned again. Tina imagined the scene on the other side without seeing it. Kelechi's confidence, the way he probably smiled when he thought he was in control. The woman beside him, hesitant, uncertain, already regretting something. Tina didn't need details to understand the picture. She didn't rehearse words or speeches. She simply stood there, one hand resting lightly on the wall, the other near the switch. The house felt very still now, as if it too was watching. When the door finally opened, Tina flipped the light on. The light revealed everything in one clean stroke, no blur, no mercy. Kelechi stepped in first mid-laugh, confidence riding his shoulders like a familiar coat. The laughter died instantly. Behind him stood Nenna, frozen in place, her expression caught somewhere between shock and apology. Her handbag clutched her chest like armor. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The silence was so thick it felt like something physical had dropped between them. Kelechi's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes moved from Tina's face to the room, as if the house itself had betrayed him by being awake. Tina stood still, meeting his gaze without blinking. Her calm was not rehearsed. It was the natural stillness of someone whose questions had just been answered. What are you doing home? Kelechi finally asked, the words tumbling out awkwardly, stripped of authority. The question hung in the air, foolish and exposed. Tina didn't answer immediately. She looked at him fully now, not the man she married, not the man she argued with over small things, but the man standing in front of her tonight. She noticed how his confidence had cracked, how his shoulders were slightly raised, how his hand tightened around his car keys like they might save him. Then she spoke, her voice level, almost gentle. "This is my house," she said. "Where else should I be?" The simplicity of the statement landed harder than anger. Nenna's breath caught. She took a half step back, already wishing herself invisible. Kelechi tried to recover, tried to laugh it off, tried to stitch together something from the scraps of his confidence. "I thought you traveled," he said weakly. Tina tilted her head slightly. "I was supposed to," she replied. "I missed the bus." She let the words sit there, unembellished. No accusation, no drama, just fact. The silence returned, heavier now, pressing down on all three of them. Nenna swallowed hard, eyes darting between Tina and Kelechi. This was not how it was supposed to be. This was not the empty house she had been promised, not the quiet safety she had clung to when she agreed to come. Tina finally shifted her gaze to the woman standing behind her husband, not with hatred, not with curiosity, but with measured understanding. She raised one finger slightly, stopping any attempt at speech before it began. "Not yet," she said softly. Then she turned back to Kelechi, her eyes steady, her posture unshaken. "The guards warned you," Tina continued, "and you still came in." The words were calm, but they hit like judgment. Kelechi felt it then, not anger, not fear, but something worse, exposure. The house was no longer a shield. The lies had nowhere to stand. And as Tina looked at him in silence once more, Kelechi realized the night had already turned against him, not with noise, but with clarity. Kelechi opened his mouth again, but this time no sound came out immediately. The lies that had once lined up neatly in his head now tripped over one another like people scrambling for an exit. He cleared his throat, tried to stand straighter, tried to look like a man who still had authority over his own life. I thought you would be on the road by now, he said finally, choosing words the way people choose excuses, quickly and without conviction. Tina watched him with a calm that felt almost surgical, as if she were separating truth from nonsense with quiet precision. She didn't interrupt him, and that silence did more damage than shouting ever could. It gave his words room to expose themselves. Behind him, Nena shifted uncomfortably, her eyes fixed on the floor. The room smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't Tina's, and even the walls seemed to notice. Kelechi gestured vaguely toward the door, then toward the sitting room, then back at Tina, as if movement could confuse reality. It's not what it looks like, he added automatically, the way men say that sentence even when it is exactly what it looks like. Tina finally spoke, and her voice carried no heat, no tremor. Then explain, she said simply. Just one word, offered like a chair to someone who was already falling. Kelechi seized it desperately. He talked about stress, about misunderstanding, about how Nena was just a friend he happened to pick up late at night and bring home after ignoring security warnings. The absurdity of his explanation hovered in the air, heavy and embarrassing. Tina listened, arms folded loosely, not to protect herself, but to contain the space. She nodded once or twice, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, the way a teacher nods when a student answers incorrectly but confidently. When he finished, she let a brief silence follow, long enough for him to hear his own foolishness echo. You lied, she said calmly. You lied at the gate. You lied in this house. And you lied to her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult him. She simply placed the truth down between them and stepped back. Nena inhaled sharply at that. She lifted her head slowly, shame written across her face in bold letters she could no longer hide. He told me you traveled, she said suddenly, her voice cracking under the weight of confession. For a family meeting. 2 days. She looked at Tina, now really looked at her, and whatever she saw there made her eyes sting. I refused at first, Nena continued, words tumbling out like they'd been waiting. I told him I couldn't come to a married man's house. He convinced me. Kelechi spun toward her, panic flashing across his face. Why are you talking now? He hissed, forgetting for a moment who truly held power in the room. Tina raised her hand slightly, and he stopped. Let her speak, Tina said quietly. And in that moment, the lie didn't just collapse, it buried him under its own weight. Nena stood there, exposed and trembling, but something in her posture shifted as she spoke. It was the strange strength that comes when shame meets honesty and decides not to hide anymore. I didn't want this, she said, turning fully toward Tina now. I told him clearly. I said I won't enter another woman's house. I said I didn't want trouble. Her voice shook, but it didn't beg. It stated. Tina listened, eyes steady, giving her the dignity of attention. Nena swallowed hard. He told me you had already traveled, that you wouldn't return tonight, that the house would be empty. She laughed softly then, bitterly. I should have trusted my instinct. I should have stayed in the car or asked him to turn back at the gate. She paused, looking down at her own hands. I'm sorry. Not because I was caught, but because I allowed myself to be convinced. The room absorbed her words quietly, without drama, without judgment. Kelechi looked between the two women like a man watching his walls fall inward. You're both ganging up on me, he protested weakly, trying to reframe the moment as an attack instead of a reckoning. Tina turned to him slowly, and when she spoke, her disappointment carried more weight than anger ever could. No, she said. We are not together in anything. This is not a group effort. This is your doing. Her tone was calm, but final. You ignored warnings. You told lies comfortably. You pressured someone who tried to say no. And you walked into this house like consequences were optional. Kelechi opened his mouth again, then closed it. For the first time that night, he truly looked small, not because he was being shouted at, but because there was nowhere left to stand. Tina turned back to Nena, studying her carefully. There was no rage in her eyes, no need to assert superiority. Just clarity. You should never have been brought here, Tina said gently. This is not your burden to carry. Nena's eyes filled instantly, not with relief, but with the sharp sting of being seen. Tina continued, "You made a mistake by believing him. But he made the mistake by convincing you." She paused, then added softly, "And that difference matters." Nena nodded, tears threatening now, but she didn't wipe them away. For the first time that night, she felt less like a villain and more like a cautionary tale. Kelechi watched the exchange in disbelief, realizing too late that the narrative he thought he controlled had rewritten itself without his permission. Tina took a slow step back, creating space where tension had been suffocating. She glanced briefly toward the staircase, then back to the two of them. "This doesn't need noise," she said quietly. "It doesn't need drama." Her eyes rested on Nena again. "You didn't come here to fight another woman, and I won't reduce myself to fighting you." She gestured gently toward the door. "You can leave now, calmly, with your dignity." The words were not cruel, they were merciful. Nena hesitated for a second, as if expecting an insult or accusation to follow. When none came, she nodded immediately. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick. She didn't know what else to say. Gratitude felt strange in a moment like this, but so did relief. Nena moved toward the door quickly, not running, but not lingering either. She slipped her shoes back on with shaking hands, avoiding Kelechi's eyes completely. At the threshold, she paused, turning back to Tina once more. "I'm sorry," she said again, this time more firmly. Tina inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the apology without turning it into a spectacle. "Take care of yourself," Tina replied. And just like that, the chapter closed. The door opened. Cool night air rushed in briefly. Then Nena stepped out and disappeared into the quiet of the compound, leaving behind a silence that felt cleaner than the one she had entered. When the door shut, the house seemed to exhale. Tina didn't look at Kelechi immediately. She walked to the sofa and sat down, as if reclaiming her space required no announcement. Kelechi stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened settling into his bones. "Tina," he began, voice low and unsure. She raised her hand without turning to him. "Not now," she said calmly. "Tonight is done." She pointed toward the hallway. "You'll sleep in the guest room." The sentence landed softly, but it changed everything. No argument followed. No shouting. Just quiet, irreversible consequence. And in that stillness, Kelechi finally understood something that hit harder than any slap. The night wasn't over, but whatever he thought he had before it began was already gone. The compound swallowed Nena quietly, the way nights in gated estates do, no echoes, no drama, just the soft crunch of gravel under careful steps. She walked without looking back, her shoulders stiff. Her head held straight not because she was proud, but because dignity sometimes survives only if you refuse to bend. The guards noticed her immediately. Moose's eyes widened slightly, not in judgment, but in understanding. He stepped aside without a word, opening the smaller gate for her, as if ushering out a bad decision rather than a person. Nena felt the weight of the moment pressing against her chest, the house behind her, the lie she had believed, the man she had trusted. She paused just before stepping out, her breath hitching as realization finally settled fully into her bones. This was not a near miss. This was a lesson paid for in embarrassment and restraint. She adjusted her bag, wiped her palms discreetly on the side of her dress, and stepped into the night with a kind of resolve that comes only after shame decides not to destroy you, but to teach you. Inside the house, the silence had changed shape. It was no longer tense, it was hollow. Kelechi stood where he had been left, unmoving, as though motion itself required permission he no longer had. He heard the faint sound of the gate closing outside, and felt something inside him close with it. Tina remained seated, calm, composed, her posture relaxed in a way that made his discomfort louder. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. Her stillness was a statement. Kelechi cleared his throat, took a step forward, then stopped, uncertain. The living room, which had once felt like neutral ground, now felt like a courtroom with no judge, only truth sitting patiently in the center. He wanted to speak, to explain again, to soften what had already hardened into consequence. But something in Tina's quiet told him that words had expired. Minutes passed without either of them speaking. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time without mercy. Tina finally stood, not abruptly, not dramatically, but with the measured confidence of someone who had already made peace with a difficult decision. She walked past Kelechi without touching him, without flinching, without acknowledging his presence beyond proximity. "Lock the door," she said simply, heading toward the stairs. "It's late." The instruction was ordinary, domestic, yet it landed with the weight of separation. Kelechi watched her go, the realization sinking in slowly and painfully. She wasn't asking for explanations anymore. She was closing chapters. Morning crept into the house reluctantly, pale light sliding through curtains that had seen better days. Kelechi woke up in the guest room with the disorienting confusion of a man who knows he is not where he belongs. The bed was unfamiliar, the ceiling wrong, the silence accusatory. For a brief, foolish second, he hoped the night had been a dream, a bad one, exaggerated by guilt and exhaustion. But the absence of Tina's presence answered that hope immediately. No sound from the other room. No movement. No breakfast smell drifting lazily through the house. Just quiet, sharp and deliberate. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face, replaying the night in fragments that refused to soften. The gate. The guards. The light. Tina's calm. Each memory landed like a stone placed carefully on his chest. When he stepped into the hallway, the house felt altered, not rearranged, but reassigned. Tina moved through the space with purpose, dressed neatly, her hair pulled back, her expression neutral. She acknowledged him only briefly with a nod that felt formal, distant. They stood in the same kitchen, but it felt like borrowed space now, like one of them was a guest who had overstayed. Kelechi opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure where to begin. Tina didn't offer him an opening. She poured herself tea, checked her phone, and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone determined not to be dragged into unnecessary conversation. The ordinary routine was more unsettling than anger would have been. It told him clearly. Life was continuing, just without him at the center. Eventually, he spoke, his voice low and tentative. "Tina, about last night." She turned slightly, just enough to acknowledge the sound of his voice. "There's nothing to explain," she said calmly. Everything that needed to be said was already said. Her words weren't sharp, they were final. She took a sip of her tea and added, "We'll talk later." "Not today." Kelechi nodded slowly, absorbing the reality of that boundary. This wasn't punishment. This was distance. And distance, he realized, was harder to fight than anger. Anger burns out. Distance settles in. The day stretched on uneasily, every hour emphasizing what had shifted. Kelechi stayed mostly out of Tina's way, moving through the house like someone afraid of disturbing fragile glass. He avoided her space, avoided eye contact, avoided even his phone, which now felt useless. Tina, on the other hand, went about her day with a quiet steadiness that unsettled him more than any confrontation could have. She made calls, sent messages, handled personal matters with the calm precision of someone who had reorganized her priorities overnight. When evening approached, she finally called him into the living room, not with urgency, not with emotion, but with intention. Kelechi sat where she indicated, his posture stiff, waiting for something he couldn't name. Tina stood opposite him, arms loosely folded, her expression composed. "This is how things will be for now," she said evenly. "You will continue using the guest room. This house needs space. I need space." She let the words settle, then continued, "There will be no arguments, no discussions in front of anyone, and no pretending that everything is fine." Kelechi swallowed, nodding. He wanted to protest, to plead, to negotiate, but her tone made it clear that this wasn't a negotiation. This was a decision. "I'll respect that," he said quietly. And for once, the words were true. Tina inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the response without softening her stance. As the night settled again over the house, Kelechi returned to the guest room with a heaviness he couldn't shake. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands, finally understanding the cost of the choices he had treated so lightly. This wasn't about one night or one mistake. It was about trust dismantled calmly, deliberately, without noise. Down the hall, Tina moved freely in her own space, unburdened by his presence. And in that quiet separation, Kelechi realized something deeply unsettling. Losing access hurts far more than losing arguments. The next morning did not arrive with bitterness. It arrived with clarity. Tina woke early, not because sleep had avoided her, but because her mind had finished arguing with itself. She moved through the house with a sense of purpose that surprised even her, opening windows, letting in air, restoring order to small things, because small things are the first place control returns. When she finally called Kelechi into the dining area, it wasn't a summons heavy with emotion. It was a conversation that had already been decided. She sat upright, hands folded loosely, her voice steady. "We need boundaries," she said. "Clear ones." Kelechi nodded immediately, relief and dread wrestling on his face. He had expected anger. He had prepared for tears. He wasn't ready for organization. Tina continued, "There will be no explanations to friends or family on my behalf. You will not speak for me. And you will not bring anyone into this house again. Not visitors. Not surprises." Each sentence landed cleanly, without flourish, the way rules do when they are meant to last. Kelechi listened, saying little, absorbing the tone more than the words. Tina wasn't asking for obedience. She was stating conditions for peace. "This is not punishment," she added calmly, anticipating his thoughts. "It's protection." She stood then, signaling the end of the discussion, without dramatics. Kelechi felt something unfamiliar rise in him, not anger, not even regret, but the uncomfortable awareness that he no longer had leverage. Boundaries had replaced arguments, and boundaries do not bend to charm. As Tina left the room, he realized that the house now ran on rules he had not written. The decision came quietly, almost gently. Later that day, Tina didn't raise her voice or rehearse speeches. She waited until the afternoon light softened the edges of the room, and then spoke plainly. "You should move out for now," she said. Kelechi looked up, startled, not because he hadn't seen it coming, but because finality always feels sudden. "I'm not throwing you out," Tina clarified. "I'm choosing space." She gestured lightly around the house. "This place needs to breathe." Kelechi nodded, swallowing the urge to argue. He asked practical questions instead, when, how long, what to take, because practicality felt safer than emotion. Tina answered simply, without promises, without timelines. When Kelechi carried his bag toward the door, the guard straightened instinctively, their greetings respectful but formal. The warmth he once took for granted had cooled into procedure. Musa opened the gate with a nod that held no judgment, only acknowledgement. Kelechi paused at the threshold, looking back once at the house that no longer belonged to him in the way it used to. Tina stood a few steps behind, not blocking the door, not pushing him out, just present. "Take care," she said. He nodded, unable to form a reply that wouldn't sound like an apology too late. The gate closed behind him with a measured finality, and for the first time, the space between them was real, not symbolic. Word did not spread loudly. It spread accurately. Family members noticed absences. Friends noticed pauses. Questions were asked softly and answered with even softer non-answers. Tina did not explain. She did not justify. She continued with her routines, visits, calls, obligations, without spectacle. That restraint did more than any announcement could have done. People sensed a shift and respected it. Kelechi, on the other hand, felt the weight of quiet consequences. Invitations slowed. Conversations shortened. He became careful with his words, wary of stories that might form without his input. Silence followed him like a shadow, and he learned quickly that silence can be louder than gossip. Alone in his temporary space, Kelechi replayed the sequence that had brought him here. Not the confrontation, that part was easy to blame on bad luck, but the choices before it, the convincing, the dismissal. The warning at the gate he had treated like background noise. Shame arrived not as a sudden blow, but as a steady presence, sitting with him in the evenings, reminding him that the hardest consequences are the ones no one announces. And in that quiet, he finally understood what he had lost wasn't just access to a house or a marriage. It was the comfort of being trusted without question. Peace did not arrive dramatically. It didn't knock or announce itself. It settled in quietly, the way morning light settles on familiar furniture and makes it look new again. Tina noticed it in small ways first, in how she slept through the night without replaying conversations, in how her shoulders no longer carried tension she had grown used to calling normal. The house responded to her mood, or maybe she was finally responding to herself. She rearranged things she had ignored for years, not because they were broken, but because they no longer fit who she was becoming. She donated clothes that belonged to an older version of herself, watered plants she had neglected, and began to enjoy her own company without apology. There was power in that quiet, unflashy power, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. Family members asked gentle questions. Tina gave gentle answers. She didn't lie. She simply didn't explain. "I'm fine," she would say and mean it. She attended the rescheduled family meeting later, arriving calm, composed, unhurried. The aunties noticed. They always do. They studied her face, her posture, the absence of strain. Some nodded approvingly. Some said nothing, which in itself was respect. Tina did not present herself as a victim or a hero. She showed up as a woman who had made a decision and stood by it. And that, more than any speech, set the tone. She laughed when she wanted to, spoke when it mattered, and excused herself when conversations drifted toward curiosity disguised as concern. Back home, Tina established routines that belonged to her alone, early walks, quiet evenings, music she liked without compromise. She didn't rush forgiveness, and she didn't dramatize distance. She simply lived. And in living well, she felt something shift permanently. The betrayal no longer defined her days. It became a chapter, not the title. Tina understood now that reclaiming peace doesn't mean pretending pain didn't happen. It means refusing to let pain make decisions for you. The house felt like hers again, not because someone else had left, but because she had returned to herself. Kelechi learned, too, but later and alone. He sat often with the memory of that night, tracing it backward like a man searching for the exact step where he lost his balance. It wasn't the living room light. It wasn't Tina's calm voice. It wasn't even the moment Nena spoke the truth. It was earlier, much earlier. It was the first refusal he brushed aside, the caution he laughed off, the warning at the gate he dismissed as inconvenience. He realized how easily he had mistaken access for entitlement, confidence for control, and how arrogance had made him deaf to every signal meant to save him. He remembered Moose's hesitation, the careful wording, the pause that begged him to think twice. He remembered Nena's unease in the car, the way she tried to redraw the line he kept erasing. He remembered telling himself nothing will happen, as if consequences required permission. The irony settled in slowly and stayed. Nothing happened loudly. Everything happened quietly. That was the punishment. No spectacle. No shouting. Just loss, measured, deserved, and complete. He had not been ambushed. He had been warned. In time, Kelechi understood the final truth of it all. The night didn't stun him because he was caught. It stunned him because he had been given chances, clear, decent chances, to stop. He ignored them all. And now, standing outside the life he once entered freely, he finally recognized the weight of a lesson learned too late. Some doors close softly. Some warnings come gently. And when a man chooses not to listen, the silence that follows becomes the loudest consequence of all. Please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.